dominated by a rhetoric that our schools have to be children-centered. For me, schools need to be participatory-centered. That we need to care about the adults who give their lives to kids as much as we need to care about the kids, in the sense that when you do the mathematics and ask how long, just take the life of a 10-year-old and ask them how much time do they spend in school in a year. In Minnesota, that's 173 days times about 6.5 hours, but would you say maybe 4 hours of instructional time? Depends. Yeah, okay. So do that, think about that. 173 days times 5 hours. That's about 11% of a child's life in a year. So why are we only focused, if you will, on what happens in schools when the majority of their lives are in community and in families, and where a lot of issues are there for kids? How can we, in following the work of, for example, Paulo Freire, last book, Teacher as Cultural Worker, how come we don't see our work as teachers as not simply covering material or teaching content, but we're concerned with the life world of children and of ourselves? So I take it very seriously that there's a difference between learning about human rights and living through it.
Mm-hmm.
That's the distinction I try to make with my work.
Okay, this is really wonderful to be on this panel. Such luminaries, people I'm learning from. I'm taking notes here.
It's mutual.
Yeah. So thanks to everybody else for showing up, of course, and to Anthony for putting this together. I think in many ways my comments may really piggyback on the amazing and harrowing tale that Sean told. I really look forward to getting your book. I guess, though, to begin to talk about how I got involved in this gig. Again, my name is David. I guess I would say two things. First of all, it's just in my blood. You know, my parents, all four of them, were, and still are, educators, and so everybody got a PhD in teaching in various, colleges, universities, community colleges. My mom, who has a doctorate of education, got out of the university and teaches life skills, vocational skills, all sorts of, just on the ground, how to make your way through life in Black communities in Atlanta for young women. And they graduate through this program, they get jobs because of the training and education and certificates, and they go out in the world and they contribute to communities. My other parents have been more mainstream educators like myself. So it's part of my family, it's part of my heritage, it's part of my blood being an educator. So there's really nothing that I could do, that could outdo what my parents did, because they already did it. They already got their PhDs and whatnot. So I'm busy being a constant disappointment. So I figured I'd take it all the way and really just embrace radical approaches to education and research. But that also was, in a sense, in my blood, because my biological father and mother both met while doing activism work in the South for SNCC, Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, Black Panthers, and other civil rights and human rights organizations. So, and then they sort of took those politics, that history, and those lessons with them into the classroom. And my dad always said, on a yearly basis, when he was teaching at a historically Black college, Fisk University, and then North Carolina Central U, that he would turn out about maybe 20 revolutionaries a year. And he didn't mean gun-toting, sort of crazed radicals, but he meant people whose thinking was critical and transformative, and who were taking those lessons from the classroom out into the world and trying to make social change. And so those are lessons that I've taken with me. And I would say probably since I was age 15, I was involved in various movements. USACA, USOSA, US out of South Africa, US out of Central America, anti-imperialist, anti-interventionist movements, the non-aligned movement, the anti-apartheid movement. One of the things I was always perplexed about as an undergrad is a lot of people I knew who were involved in anti-apartheid work. Oh, this is great, I'll get involved in that. Trying to get our university to divest from various corporations invested in the South African regime, the apartheid regime. But I was also involved with animal liberation groups. I was involved with environmental groups. I was involved with the Greens not like the Green Party, but people who called themselves Greens because they were involved in deep ecological movements. I was involved with Earth First. But none of these folks really worked together, and I always found that really frustrating. And so, I was like the only black dude involved in some of this crazy stuff. And, we were doing some radical stuff at the time, facing down various corporations, pushing the university to stop doing certain things and to start doing others. This was before universities even had recycling programs, for example. And I had, a run-in or two with law enforcement around that work. But so I was looking around, wondering, are people integrating these ideas? And that's when I started reading Robert Bullard's work. Anthony had mentioned him earlier. And so Robert Bullard is really considered the founding father of environmental justice studies. He's also one of the founders of the environmental justice movement. And so for me, he was, and is, a wonderful example of somebody who really did combine scholarship with teaching and pedagogy, with activism and politics. I was also influenced by people like John Gaventa. He was an amazing, still is an amazing sociology, political science professor. He does work in the nonprofit community now. He took over the job, probably not directly from Miles Horton, but a couple of people removed, running the Highlander Center in Newmarket, Tennessee, a place where, of course, Dr. King, Rosa Parks, Ralph Abernathy, all these amazing human rights and civil rights leaders were trained and trained others. And so here I was in a classroom at the University of Tennessee, Knoxville, being taught, theories of social change, inequality, Marxism, Weber, all of this stuff by an individual who had written and done research on this stuff, but who was also the executive director of one of the most important social change organizations, frankly, in the United States, and certainly in the 20th century. So this was really great, having these role models. And so, despite the fact that when I was in grad school, people told me you can't do research or activism and scholarship, I said, no, you're wrong. I've got all these people who've come before me who've really mentored me, who've showed me that is possible. So I, having said that, in terms of my own experience, I would say I've had a lot of benefits, a lot of privileges that a number of folks I know who've tried to do and have succeeded at doing social justice research in the academy have not. I'm happy to talk about that, but much of it begins with just having had academic history, heritage in my family, and knowing this environment and not being an alien and foreign environment for me. That's really where it began. That was privilege number one. So I would say, as much as I've perhaps had some various challenging experiences, I've also benefited from and been able to navigate this pretty well for a number of reasons. But maybe to build on, as I said, some of John's comments, my experiences range from publishing with alternative journals and presses to the very mainstream. Although with the exception, I would say, I've never published and probably never will publish with, say, a top sort of prestigious press, and that's for obvious reasons. Most of the work I do is just not acceptable or palatable to them. But what I've found is that everything that's been said thus far really does matter, and for students here, it really forces you to think about all of the politics, about all of the power plays that goes on behind the publication of the books that come to you, that you buy, that you maybe sell back to the bookstore, but that are assigned to you in the classes. And I don't know if anybody in this room, other than folks up here, have really thought about that. And to me, it blows my mind. You just get given this book in this class. Oh, I'm going to read this. This is obviously representative of the state of the field. This is clearly some important work. Yes, I may be asked to be critical about it, etc. But the kinds of shenanigans and politics behind the publication process, are generally obscured and not talked about. So this forum is really important. I want to just tell a few stories about that. Robert Bullard, the founder, I would say a founder of environmental justice studies. I didn't know this until a couple of years ago, that his classic, and he has many classic books, but his classic book, Dumping in Dixie, about environmental racism, environmental justice struggles in the southern United States, was rejected by something like a dozen presses, most of them academic presses, before finally getting accepted at Westview. Westview, I think, is in Boulder, Colorado, and not a very big press. But some of these academic presses must be kicking themselves now, because Robert Fuller